Crowns, palaces, and elaborate ceremonies. But what are they really? Most view the Queen as a benign old lady and symbol of England, but deeper research shows she and the royal family are nothing but a ruthless criminal gang whose enormous wealth, built on the suffering of millions, remains a state secret to this day. With the royal family's considerable media influence, it's easy to get caught up in the romance and pageantry, but beneath the gilded palace gates lies a hidden world of scandals, Nazis, murder, and even cannibalism.
We all knew there is something strange about the various royal families scattered around the world, but I found something that takes this strangeness to a whole nother level. The article I'm about to read is specifically talking about the British royal family and the strange history they don't teach in school. Quote, British royalty dined on human flesh, but don't worry, it was 300 years ago, by Fiona McCrae for the Daily Mail. They have long been famed for their love of lavish banquets and rich recipes. But what is less well known is that the British royals also had a taste for human flesh. A new book on medicinal cannibalism has revealed that possibly as recently as the end of the 18th century, British royalty swallowed parts of the human body. The author adds that this was not a practice reserved for monarchs, but was widespread among the well-to-do in Europe. Medicinal cannibalism. Both Queen Mary II and her uncle King Charles II both took distilled human skull on their deathbeds in 1698 and 1685 respectively, according to Dr. Sug. Even as they denounced the barbaric cannibals of the New World, they applied, drank, or wore powdered Egyptian mummy, human fat, flesh, bone, blood, brains, and skin. Moss taken from the skulls of dead soldiers was even used as a cure for nosebleeds, according to Dr. Richard Sugg at Durham University. Dr. Sugg said, the human body has been widely used as a therapeutic agent, with the most popular treatments involving flesh, bone, or blood. Cannibalism was found not only in the New World, as often believed, but also in Europe. One thing we are rarely taught at school yet is evidenced in literary and historic texts of the time is this. James I refused corpse medicine. Charles II made his own corpse medicine, and Charles I was made into corpse medicine. Along with Charles II, eminent users or prescribers included Francis, Elizabeth surgeon John Bannister, Elizabeth Grey, Countess of Kent, Robert Boyle, Thomas Willis, William III, and Queen Mary. This painting of Charles I's execution in 1649 shows people surging forward to mop up the former king's blood. It was thought to have healing properties. The book gives numerous vivid, often disturbing examples of the practice, ranging from the execution scaffolds of Germany and Scandinavia, through the courts and laboratories of Italy, France, and Britain, to the battlefields of Holland and Ireland, and on to the tribal man-eating of the Americas. A painting showing the 1649 execution of Charles I showed people mopping up the king's blood with handkerchiefs. Dr. Sugg said, this was used to treat the king's evil, a complaint more usually cured by the touch of living monarchs. Over in continental Europe, where the axe fell routinely on the necks of criminals, blood was the medicine of choice for many epileptics. In Denmark, the young Hans Christian Andersen saw parents getting their sick child to drink blood at the scaffold. So popular was this treatment that hangmen routinely had their assistants catch the blood in cups as it spurted from the necks of dying felons. Occasionally, a patient might shortcut this system. At one early 16th century execution in Germany, a vagrant grabbed the beheaded body before it had fallen and drank the blood from him. The last recorded instance of this practice fell in 1865. Whilst James I had refused to take human skull, his grandson Charles II liked the idea so much that he bought the recipe. Having paid perhaps $6,000 for this, he often distilled human skull himself in his private laboratory. Dr. Sug said, accordingly known before long as the king's drops, this fluid remedy was used against epilepsy, convulsions, diseases of the head, and often as an emergency treatment for the dying. It was the very first thing which Charles reached for on February 2nd in 1685, at the start of his last illness, and was administered not only on his deathbed, but on that of Queen Mary in 1698. Dr. Sugg's research will be featured in a forthcoming Channel 4 documentary with Tony Robinson, in which they reconstruct versions of older cannibalistic medicines with the help of pigs' brains blood, and skull. The book, called Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires, will be published on June 29th by Routledge and charts the largely forgotten history of European corpse medicine from the Renaissance to the Victorians." End quote.
Queen Elizabeth II, one of the most influential and recognizable people alive today. Most think of UK's royal family as purely symbolic, with no real power. This notion, however, could not be further from the truth. While the United States fought a lengthy war to gain independence, nations such as North Ireland, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand never fully gained complete sovereignty from the crown. Apart from ribbon cutting and picture taking, the Queen is actually head of state in all Commonwealth nations and possesses the power to dismiss and appoint new prime ministers and parliament members. She can command armed forces, refuse parliamentary legislation, pardon convicted criminals, and even declare a state of emergency. In fact, all leaders of Commonwealth states, such as UK, Canada, and Australia, swear allegiance not to the people who elected them, but the Queen. This even applies to judges, lawyers, and police.
Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this Honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Canadian warships are called HMCS, or Her Majesty's Canadian Ships. In Australia, it's Her Majesty's Australian Ship. Canadian police are known as Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The UK Prime Minister even consults with the Queen once a week. No record is kept of these legendary meetings, despite their obvious influence on public affairs.
The Queen is legally entitled to meet the Prime Minister once a week. If she can't meet him in person, she's allowed a telephone conversation. During these meetings, she's allowed to discuss anything she wishes, any matter at all. However, whatever she does discuss is kept completely confidential from the rest of the public. We do not have a right to know what she discusses on her behalf.
With wealth comes power, specifically the power not to obey the laws of the land in the way that every other citizen of the country is required to do. The Prince of Wales Duchy of Cornwall is not, for instance, subject to planning permission or planning consent in the way that any other builder would be. This means that Charles can avoid fines of up to £50,000 that will be levied against anyone else breaking these planning laws. Every other landlord has to grant squatters' rights if they occupy land for 10 years. But for the Prince, that time limit is 60 years. Normally, landlords must allow their leaseholders to buy the freehold on a property. But not the Prince, who can hold leaseholders in that condition forever. The duchy only pays tax voluntarily and has free advice from government lawyers. It also benefits from exemptions that no other private sector body enjoys. For instance, Charles pays no corporation tax or capital gains tax on his business enterprises.
As a reminder of her enormous power, Commonwealth nations even display the Queen on their currency. While many are unaware of such powers, most of those who are view these powers as emblematic. In reality, not only are these powers genuine, she has flexed this inherited power in the not-so-distant past. Australia, 1975. The government is hopelessly gridlocked on the new budget. With the clock running out, the government goes into shutdown, similar to the US shutdown in 2013. Except in this case, things ended much differently. Instead of a 2-week-long shutdown, the Australian Governor-General, acting on behalf of the Queen, dismissed and replaced the sitting Prime Minister. The next day, after the controversial spending bill was passed, he fired all of Parliament and held new elections to replace them. Not only does she have the power, she's not afraid to use it. Everyone knows the Queen is rich. But just how wealthy the 90-year-old is might surprise you. While looking at the names of the richest people alive, you will see names like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Carlos Slim. However, the true wealth of the Queen is hidden in private trusts and even in the monarchy itself. A casual search of the Queen's net worth reveals a sum around $600 million. This wealth is astonishing by anyone's standards, but her true wealth is absolutely mind-blowing. By allowing assets to be owned by the monarchy, The royal family can conceal their true value while still ensuring their wealth is passed on to their heir. The truth is, her actual net worth is in the trillions. She still owns 89% of Canadian land called Crown Land, which is administered by various government agencies and departments on behalf of the Queen. She essentially leases it out to her own people and receives a percentage of the funds.
The largest landowners in Britain is the Crown Estate. They own a combined property portfolio of around £8.1 billion. That includes agricultural land as well as urban properties. And this isn't the monarch's personal private land, but she receives an annual percentage revenue from this every year.
Canadians are not land owners, they are land holders. This is a big difference. Aside from her enormous land ownership in Canada, she also owns 50% of UK coastline, all of Regent Street, and is rumored to own parts of Manhattan.
Crown land is some of the most valuable in the country. Indeed, the value of the Crown's urban property, £4 billion, is 4 times greater than the value of its rural land holdings. The Crown owns, for instance, the entirety of Regent Street, around half of St James's in London's West End, and retail property across the UK, including in Oxford, Exeter, Nottingham, Newcastle and Harlow. The Crown owns part of the Blue Water Retail Park in Kent. It also owns retail parks in Leeds, Milton Keynes, Merseyside, Slough, Swansea, Portsmouth, Harlow, Maidstone, Hemel Hempstead, Nottingham, Edinburgh, Warwick, Cheltenham and Jersey. The Windsor Estate controls Ascot Racecourse, golf clubs, hotels, farms and woodland. In Scotland, the Crown owns fishing rights on many rivers, oyster and mussel fishing revenues, and mining rights throughout its holdings.
She secretly held a major share in a large Mississippi plantation called the Delta Pine and Land Company, until 2 U.S. congressmen blew the whistle on her and her use of a company called Courtlands, as in Courtlands Textiles, to hide her shares in the plantation known locally as the Queen's Plantation. Aside from a jaw-dropping real estate portfolio worth an estimated £17 trillion, her assets include a solid gold carriage weighing over 4 tons, 27,000 masterpieces, Rolls-Royces, and Bentleys. But her stolen riches could not be better exemplified than by the very jewels and diamonds the Queen wears. Fabulous pieces, legendary diamonds, and historical regalia worth untold billions. Her jewelry collection contains over 16 diamond jewel crowns, one of which contains a special diamond broken from the largest diamond ever found, known as the Star of Africa, and another diamond, known as the Koh-i-Noor diamond, a piece of myth and legend in India, which fell from one emperor and conqueror to another for centuries before finally being given to Queen Victoria by a 10-year-old Maharaja. The crown jewels are so secretive, they are never allowed to be studied even by experts, and the jewelry collection's worth remains unknown. But how could one family amass trillions in assets? The answer lies in the enormous power their family has leveraged throughout the past century. Some of their wealth has been stolen from their own taxpayers. However, much of it was taken from the many colonies her family once owned entirely. Many of these places contained enormous natural resources, which were exploited and sold with little regard to the native peoples, as is the case with the diamond known as the Star of Africa, which she wears on her crown. Still, much of her wealth comes from even more dubious sources. The English royal family had a great connection with slavery, starting from Elizabeth I. The Duke of York used to get his initials D.Y. branded onto the left buttock or breast of each of the 3,000 slaves who were his. In 1624, the English colonized Barbados and St. Kitts, and approximately 23 years later, the first sugar from Barbados was sent to England. England captured Jamaica from the Spanish, and the slave trade had yet another place in which to thrive. Elizabeth I established the Royal African Company to facilitate the transport and sale of slaves which would thrive up until the dawn of the 18th century. But the wealth they obtained from selling African lives would be chump change compared to the haul they would soon make on China. The royal family joined with the East India Trading Company to import into China. The number one import? Opium.
The drug was illegal in China, though the ban was widely ignored. There were an estimated 12 million peasants addicted to opium. The authorities there called it a deadly poison ruining the minds and morals of our people. The British grew opium poppies in India. There they processed it in factories on a colossal scale. Finally, it was shipped to China and sold to smugglers.
Almost 13% of the income of India under British rule was derived from the sale of good quality Bengal opium to British-run opium distributors in China.
In 1839, the Chinese emperor decided he'd had enough. He ordered more than 1,000 tons of British-supplied opium to be seized and destroyed. The Opium Wars were about to begin. Britain's first ocean-going iron warship, the Nemesis, built in Liverpool, was sent out to take on the Emperor's navy. It helped destroy much of it in a single afternoon. This was the modern world confronting an ancient one, sailing junks against steam-driven gunboats. The Chinese had no choice but to surrender and to open 5 ports to British trade.
Ultimately, the Chinese people would fight 2 devastating wars to rid themselves of the British imported opium and put an end to the addiction crisis which for so long had ravaged their population. Perhaps their true power and wealth would be better known if not for their favorite lapdog, the media. Sure, lately the royal family has been the subject of some scrutiny. Still, many mainstream news outlets continue to divert attention from royal scandals or do their best to stop them from reaching the royal family.
The media collaborates in the cover-up. It collaborates in massaging the news in order to downplay anything which is critical of the royal family.
Usually the monarchy can rely on the British press to keep silent on any embarrassing story about the monarchy.
The royal family have a huge amount of influence over the press. They're extremely well connected, and the press pretty much acts as a universal cheerleader for the royal family.
I think the royal family's influence over the press is considerable and has probably in a way got greater because the British media has become more and more obsequious, I think, over the last 20 to 30 years, much more reluctant to criticise, to expose what is going on inside the British establishment.
Every charitable gesture or good work, on the other hand, is magnified. It is the work of PR experts, spin doctors, and the loyal royal correspondents.
The media's sycophantic obsession with anything royal, royal weddings, royal births, only feeds the notion that the royal family matters, either politically or economically. The use, or as I should say misuse, of the media for political power is a tactic deployed by the propagandist social engineer Edward Bernays. Bernays felt that society was dangerous and must be manipulated by elite controllers. He is famous for being the man who got women to smoke. In the early 1920s, smoking was mostly for men. In some places, even forbid women from smoking. Bernays, hired by tobacco companies to increase sales, famously paid female models to march in the 1929 Easter Parade, smoking cigarettes branded as torches of freedom. One of his primary tactics was to publicly pair politicians with various celebrities in a clever move to make people associate one with the other.
This goes back to Edward Bernays 100 years ago, saying, look, to make politicians and royalty popular, we'll have Hollywood stars come to banquets and events with them. We'll have music stars. We'll have other people go there to basically make these elites be seen as celebrities themselves.
similar to how we saw the London Olympic Games begin with the Queen being escorted by Daniel Craig as James Bond. Television shows like The Royals capitalize on the public's obsession with royalty, but also perpetuate the notion that hereditary power is part of life, and even looks cool and trendy, when in reality, it is so 17th century. From the time we were children, movies glamorize royalty and portray them as something to be protected. A recent example is The Kingsman, in which an elite group of young wannabe spies compete to see which has the ultimate devotion to the crown. Elaborate tests are created to see if they are willing to die and even kill their own dog for the Queen.